Welcome to Podcast Pediatricians, episode number 10.
Hoo-yah!
Ooh, double digits.
Yep.
I'm Matt Gotthold.
I'm Rob Walter.
And we are the Podcast Pediatricians. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Google Play. We are sharing our own personal opinions on pediatric care. Always talk to your own pediatric caregiver about your child. Pediatric caregivers should always consult expert guidelines and consider their own community's standards of care.
So we conclude allergic rhinitis part 2, focusing on treatment. But first, we wanted to talk about an allergy-related issue, peanut allergies. We certainly will devote episodes to food allergies in the future, but we've alluded to the fact that peanut allergy has been in the news based on the LEAP study in 2015, New England Journal of Medicine. Now, LEAP, L-E-A-P, stands for the Learning Early About Peanut Allergy Study. Now, I think it should be called LEPA. Just bothers me they dropped the A at the end. So
yeah, wasn't LEAP like a dirty acronym or something when we were in medical school too? I forget. Well, maybe not in your medical school.
Perhaps at Jefferson Medical School, home of Dr. Mooter.
Yeah, my residency was Jefferson. I went to Hahnemann, which is now Drexel. They had to change their
also,
name.
They got rid of Medical College of Pennsylvania.
They did. Well,
too.
they kind of ate them up. And
NCP was more of a traditional women's medical school.
It was.
And now it's gone. You don't have a medical school.
I'm alum.
Yes,
Enia.
Did you go to medical school?
Did I ever tell you about the guy who looked at my medical school diploma, which Hahnemann was?
Oh, it's huge.
Pompous, yeah. And it was in Latin. And I had this teenager look at it the first visit he ever had with me and get this quizzical look in his eye. And he started to look a little bit concerned. He said, where did you go to medical school?
People do that even without looking at your diploma, Matt, but that's another story. Anyway, peanut allergic reactions is the number one cause of fatal food anaphylaxis in the United States, and peanut allergies have tripled in the past 15 years, up to 2% of all children, as noted in a national study by Dr. Jackie Pangracic et al. In Pediatrics. Now, do you recognize that name, Matt?
It sounded vaguely familiar. I thought I knew her in Greek club.
Oh, you're Greek?
No, I'm not Greek. But a friend of mine and I on picture day when we were seniors managed to insinuate ourselves into pretty much every picture of the clubs. So I was in Greek club. I was in the Leo Club, and a few others that I really didn't belong in.
I'm sure your mom was proud. Well, actually, speaking of high school, you might recognize the name because Dr. Pangracic is in the West Aurora High School Hall of Fame. And yes, she's the head of allergy at Northwestern Children's Hospital in Chicago. I know you don't know Chicago, but it's unbelievably amazing that a person can graduate from West Aurora High School and go to those
Wasn't
heights.
exactly the pinnacle of scholastics.
I digress.
Yeah.
So, the peanut allergy increase coincided with the recommendation that peanut introduction be delayed until 2 or 3 years of age to lessen peanut allergies. I think this message came out at the beginning of both mine and Matt's private practice career, so we both really pushed hard at telling parents, don't give peanuts until 2 or 3 years of age.
Yeah, I told them to think about waiting until the child was at least 2. I know a lot of the allergists in the area was saying 3. Peanut butter was big at my family, though, so I introduced my kids when they were a year old.
Okay, so you knew enough, even back then, before the LEPA study, to do that. So.
No, it was just gambling with my children's well-being.
No, I'm impressed. Actually, I'm confused by your excellence, Dr. Gotthold.
As well you should be.
Ignatius?
Yes.
In 2008, it was reported that peanut allergies were 10-fold higher in Jewish kids in the United Kingdom versus Jewish kids in Israel of similar ancestry. The difference? The Israeli kids ate Bamba, a peanut butter flavored puffed corn snack. It's totally kosher too. And with your recent possible Jewish ancestry, Matt, I just thought you should know that.
Good to know.
So based on this observation, the LEPA study was designed taking 640 randomized infants, 4 to 11 months of age, with severe eczema or egg allergies or both. And after they did a baseline peanut skin test, they gave some of these infants peanut products early and often until 5 years of age, and others avoided peanut products until about 5 years of age.
So I'm assuming these initial tests were they did the skin tests and showed that the children weren't sensitive. to peanut.
No, some weren't and some were. And that's the interesting part. So of the infants who had negative peanut skin tests initially, 13.7% in the no peanuts at all group ended up peanut allergic versus only 1.3% of those infants who got peanut products early and often. A huge statistically significant difference. Huge. Now, the other part of this group who did have a positive skin test, they gave half of them peanut products early and often, and those kids only had a 10.6% rate of peanut allergies. And the ones who avoided peanuts, which you would think that's what you do if they had a positive peanut allergy, ended up having 35.3% of them having a peanut allergy. So bottom line, early peanut introduction in children with severe eczema, whether they had a positive skin test or not, prevented lifelong peanut allergies.
Wow. That's pretty impressive stats.
And also the opposite, again, of what we had been preaching, or at least I had been preaching.
Sure.
I remember specifically one mom who was so guilty she gave her child peanut product at 1. The child had a peanut reaction, and I told her it might have happened anyway, but unspoken was that, boy, maybe you ended up causing that peanut reaction, which is totally not true.
Did you ever, you were throwing a lot of stats around there. Did you ever take stats in college or?
I did. Well, at least at Northwestern, it was required to take statistics. Maybe not in Philly Hahnemann, but we did have to take statistics.
My mail-order degree did not require it.
In Latin.
That's right. What's your favorite stat? Do you have any favorite stats?
I've never been asked that question.
It's cocktail party fodder.
I guess a fun fact I've always liked is 4 out of 5 dentist surveys recommend sugarless gum for their patients who chew gum.
That's cliche.
It's always dental work. There's also when 80% of dentists who choose toothpaste choose Colgate, and which has been totally debunked. But
pretty heavily advertised.
I'm not original on this, but you talk about the 4 out of 5. So what's that other dentist? It makes me think of my dentist growing up, Dr. Stanley Rothman, who used to only talk mostly in a Donald Duck voice on purpose. Very entertaining as he gave me the...
for about the first 2 seconds.
as he made me gasp for my dental work.
You got gas?
I did. He was really
into... such
into...
a wuss.
Well, he gave me gas before he did the cavities. And I had this, and I never did drugs or anything, but I kind of had this routine where I wouldn't breathe it in as long as I could. He kept saying, it's not working yet. I said, nope.
So you could get a big hit?
He put it up really high, and I started hyperventilating. That's what a nerdy person in Long Island does to get high.
You're a nitrous oxide addict. Oh, my God.
And he still is, I think he's still with us and retired. And where do you think now that you're in the tribe, Matt, where do you think a Jewish dentist from New York would be?
I don't know the first thing about Jewish dentists.
But where would they be from New York years later in retirement? What part of the country?
Florida?
Exactly. Okay. So, hi, Dr. Rothman.
It seems like a lot of the country retires to Florida. So the coolest stat I know, and I actually just looked this up to verify it, is that originally I thought that the stat was 1 out of every 9 people in the United States live in California. And actually, when I looked it up, at this point, it's more like 1 in every 8 people in the U.S. live in California. That's quite the population-laden state, although it's also huge. I think it's
its own country.
3rd largest state. Yeah, well, it's its own economy, right? I mean, isn't it something like the 6th largest economy on its own in the world? That's mind-boggling.
Right, and on the edge of many different progressive things.
Yeah, for sure. Both liberal and conservative, apparently.
So early peanut consumption prevented peanut allergies. And that's why we keep an open mind. Although not for alternative facts, but we know that guidelines can change. So this study led to new guidelines by an expert panel from the NIAID, or the National Institute of Allergies and Infectious Disease, for preventing peanut allergies in children. There's a great little summary of these recommendations in the Contemporary Pediatrics in April 2017 by Mary Beth Nierengarten and Dr. David Fleischer from the University of Colorado, the Buffaloes. Now, the podcast pediatricians have combed through the January 2017 NIAID addendum to get more specific peanut pearls. Now, Matt, do you like the way I use this in the third term, the podcast pediatricians?
Do you know what that's called? It's called Iliism. So,
I was going to say conceit.
Well,
Iliism.
that also,
Iliism.
yeah. So iliism is the act of referring to oneself in the third person. So there are some famous people who did that, right? I mean, can you think of any?
I go back to sports. So T.O.
T.O., definitely. Terrell Owens.
And Ricky Henderson.
Ricky Henderson, he's one. I think that let me see here. Didn't Richard Nixon do that when he first lost?
Right.
I think lost. Was it the governorship in California? You won't have Richard Nixon to kick around anymore. You know, that kind of thing going on.
But we did.
Bo Jackson.
Oh, you don't know Bo. Greatest athlete ever.
Indeed. Who else? Pele. Pele was a third person kind of guy. Elvis did a little
Cosmos.
bit. Biggest, I think, or the most annoying at least, is Elmo. Right.
Elmo wants a cookie.
Elmo. Does anybody rile you up more than Elmo? Like any character?
I don't get riled up that much by Elmo.
Oh, Elmo just puts me on edge.
I don't.
Oh, yeah. Have you ever, like, if there was a cartoon character, or if there was a character that you wanted to punch in the face, who would it be?
Dating myself, probably Barney.
Barney, yeah. Tinky Winky was a fave of mine, but I've got to say Elmo leads the pack. I can feel the air going out of his belly as I punched him in the face. Anyway, go ahead. I've got Elmo issues.
I have nothing to say to that. Back to Peanuts. These guidelines ended up dividing infants into 3 basic categories. Infants with egg allergies or severe eczema, 1. Those with mild to moderate eczema, 2. And the vast majority of other infants with no eczema and no allergies to eggs, number 3. Now, for these infants with severe eczema or egg allergies, they recommended introducing peanut foods at 4 to 6 months of age after a consideration of getting a peanut-specific blood IgE test or peanut skin prick test or both. So, first off, we're rarely going to know if a 4 to 6 month old has an egg allergy at all. So it really gets back in these recommendations for babies with eczema. Severe eczema is defined as requiring prescription topical steroids or calcineurin inhibitors like Elidel or Protopic. And also remember that we're all both slathering these infants with moisturizer every day, as per our previous podcast.
Periodically dipping them in bleach baths.
To prevent eczema.
Don't knock
now,
till you try.
Overall, blood tests for food allergies in general are not that helpful. And if you're going to get a blood test for this, you should only get Peanuts, not getting a food blood test panel.
Why aren't they helpful, Dr. Rob
False
Walter?
positives, false negatives.
Yeah. So it's not uncommon for a parent to come in and ask us to please do a panel, they kind of put it that way, on their child for food allergies, even prior to the child having had any solid foods at all. And the problem with that, of course, is that these things are not particularly specific, and they tend to lack accuracy as it pertains to some foods that the child's already consumed and not had any issues with at all. So for us as pediatricians, and I suspect the allergists are even more astute at this, we try not to test the children for a food unless we know or suspect that they've already had an issue with it.
To be honest, Matt, in the last years, I've never blood tests for food allergies. And also, if you know there's a food allergy like peanuts, the allergist get the newer component testing to better evaluate this. And then you get the whole issue of oral food challenges. And I don't know about you, but if a child needs an oral food challenge, I'm not doing it in my office.
Oh, no. I understand that some people who are kind of out in the hinterlands and don't have access to allergists as easily as we do, because for us they're very accessible.
They grow on trees.
Food challenges in the office, but it's just not something that around here we touch. The other part, you said that you really never screen for food allergies. One of the main times I do it, if I do it at all, is if we're already getting some blood work done, especially at the 12-month-old visit, and a parent has reported to me that their child's had any issues with food that were enough for me to suggest that they stop offering that to the child, then sometimes I'll roll that into the 1-year-old lab tests that include, for us at least, a limited CBC and a lead screen.
And that makes sense. And per these guidelines, if I have a 4-month-old with severe eczema and I want to introduce peanut early, I am just going to send them to the allergist to get the testing if I'm truly going to start peanut products in these babies early who we know have a high risk for peanut allergies.
I am just now trying to assimilate this practice in terms of even suggesting to parents with kids with eczema that they initiate these things early. So to be honest with you, I haven't thought far enough ahead to have a real strategy here. but it's coming. It's certainly going to be in.
His wheels are turning. And so, Matt, what do you do about a baby who has a sib or a parent with a severe peanut anaphylaxis history?
Yeah, so those are children also that I would certainly consider screening at the 1-year-old visit. So even though they haven't had any peanut yet, at least in theory, the exposure to peanut can be relatively infinitesimal and still have some reaction to it. And so I would at least get a baseline on those kids around a year if I think about it.
Yeah, but I'm calling you on that because you're waiting for a year, but the whole point of the LEAP study is that if you give peanut products early, you can prevent peanut allergies. So I think looking at the study, you don't want to wait till a year.
Well, why would I want to expose a whole family to peanuts when you just told me they were all allergic to them?
Well, I'm talking about that child.
Well, doesn't that child live with its peanut allergic brother or sister?
Well, that's the other point about if they're in the house. And I can understand
generally,
that.
a lot of these families tend to keep their homes peanut free.
I don't know. That's a good point that they may have a peanut-free house. But on the other hand, I don't want them to have 2 children with peanut allergies also.
Sure. Right. You could definitely look at this both ways. I don't think there's a right answer here.
Maybe we can agree that if you have a
Let's arm
situation with a sibling or a parent and the baby has severe eczema at 4 months, that maybe you'd want to get them exposed early.
Yep. I think
We agree.
Case by case.
And the other thing that sometimes comes up is if there's some kind of peanut allergy in the family and the mom says, should I eat peanuts myself if I'm breastfeeding, or should I eat peanut products during pregnancy so I can reduce the chance of peanut allergies in the baby? And I don't think there's great evidence, but of what I've read, there's no reason for them not to have peanut products.
Right. Yeah. I've read the same. And some of the literature is not really contradicted itself, but some of the literature comes out more strongly in favor of that. I think it's not a bad idea at all. Why not expose the baby to those antigens while they're still in utero?
Agree totally. Okay, for the second group, the mild to moderate eczema infants, which will be more common, without any egg allergies, they recommend introducing peanut foods at about 6 months of age, which, again, is a little bit earlier than I used to do. Now, for the third group, the majority with no eczema and no egg allergies, they recommend introducing peanut foods according to family preferences and cultural practices. Now, to me, that's a pretty nebulous recommendation. So, Matt, what is the peanut cultural practice in South Jersey?
What I usually do, and I've changed this up a bit over the years, but around the 4-month-old visit, we usually discuss when is it a good time to introduce solids. First of all, babies who are being breast milk fed or breastfed exclusively, there's really no reason that they need to have solids until they're at least 6 months old.
And that's the official recommendation of the AP, but I got to say, I've kind of softened that myself with a breastfed baby. A lot of my exclusively breastfed babies start some solids around 5 months or so. If they're ready to accept it, certainly never force it. But that is not exactly with the AAP guidelines.
I do respect the AAP guidelines because they have certainly proven themselves out in terms of good health for babies who are exclusively breast milk fed. But nonetheless, the breastfeeding parents in my practice still get the same spiel at 4 months old as I give the ones who feed their children formula, which is, hey, listen, when it's time to go ahead and start solids, here's the way I would recommend doing it. For me, I've taken my cues really from what I've tried to learn over the years in terms of what are some of the most innocuous things to introduce. One of my very best friends had a son who was pretty much allergic to everything that his poor mom consumed. And so when it was time to go ahead and start him up on solids, he had been seen down at Johns Hopkins by Robert Wood, a very famous allergist. And Dr. Wood had suggested this child start on some of the orange and yellow vegetables because they seem to be the least allergenic. So I'll usually suggest people start with carrots or squash or yams. I always tell people everybody needs a picture of their child with yams smeared all over their face. It's just a classic, it's a classic childhood picture. And then usually suggest moving on to some greens and then some fruits. And I know that some people claim that the babies don't really care if they have fruits or vegetables. I don't know. They have taste buds just like the rest of us. So
I agree.
Yeah.
I go with the veggies first. I always make the point to the parents that grandmas usually say you want to do veggies before fruits so the baby doesn't get a sweet tooth. I don't think anybody has any idea if that's true, but I think it makes sense to me. I also still originally start with the cereals, and one change I've made over the years is I've gotten away from rice cereal completely because it's kind of constipating. It's empty calories. There were some reports about some traces of arsenic in rice cereal at some point. I'm not sure it's anymore, but I really go to oatmeal, barley, and whole grain cereals for babies. Do that for a week or two, a couple times a day before I start eating vegetables and then the fruits.
Yeah, I don't exclude cereals, but I do make a point of saying that it's really not a priority to start with them necessarily. At some point, if they want to roll it in, that's fine. And the advantage of the cereals, once a baby gets to 6 months old, especially if a baby is still being largely breast milk fed, is that's where a lot of extra iron comes from. The other thing here is that some parents have asked me, is it okay to continue to just exclusively breastfeed the baby beyond 6 months? And my answer to that is generally what I'm most concerned about is a relative lack of iron then in their diet. It would seem as though the iron availability, which is actually quite good in breast milk, although there's not a lot of iron in breast milk, but the iron availability is fabulous. But at some point, and it's usually around 6 months, the baby's need and the availability start to cross over each other, and the baby becomes relatively iron deficient if they're not provided with another iron source.
Right, and even beyond nutrition, it's just developing the baby's oral motor muscles in preparing a bolus and swallowing. Swallowing is a very complicated action for babies, and it's a learned action.
Really? That's the best word you can come up with.
And if you wait until 8, 9, 10 months, I really am concerned they're not going to be able to learn that as well.
Right.
So that's the other part about solids.
I've always seen that as kind of a window of opportunity. So when parents say they're loath to start their child on solids, they're afraid or they just would prefer not to. In my mind, at least, there is this window of opportunity somewhere between 6 and 9-ish or 10-ish months where if you don't start to introduce other textures, then the baby becomes increasingly resistant about the time when you do.
Now, getting back to Peanuts, the Contemporary Peds article kind of gives some bullet points at the end for docs and for parents about this early peanut introduction. The first is that peanut products should never be the first solid introduced. The second, only introduce peanut products the first time to a healthy infant. If the baby has a cold or other illness, don't introduce the peanut products that day. Third, when you do introduce peanut products for the first time, do it at home, not in daycare, not in a restaurant, certainly not at Chuck E. Cheese.
No, that's where you introduce the snot of thousands of the baby's contemporaries.
And diarrhea. An adult supervisor with ample time should be closely monitoring that baby on the initial peanut introduction. And know that mild peanut reactions can include a new rash or hives around the mouth and face, and more severe reactions include lip swelling, vomiting, widespread hives or welts, face or tongue swelling, difficulty breathing, wheezing, repetitive coughing, turning blue or pale, and sudden tiredness, lethargy, or seeming limp. Now, I don't think it's a bad idea to have some Benadryl ready in case there's a reaction, but for any reaction, seek medical attention and call 911. Now, the first time they get the peanut product, you should give a small amount and wait 10 minutes before gradually giving the remainder of a full portion. They also make the point that you should never give peanut butter directly from the spoon before age 4 or whole peanuts before age 5 due to choking hazards. Although 4 seems kind of old.
4 does seem kind of old for that.
To not give a little bit on a spoon.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm not sure that 5 doesn't seem a little bit older than at least when I gave my kids some nuts to chew on. I usually figured 3 is relatively safe, 3 and above. That and popcorn. Those were kind of my 2 ages for those 2 things.
And then I guess you were really close to the ENT who had to go do a bronchoscopy and take the peanut out of your child's airway.
How many times have you seen that? Literally in your career, I'm curious. I've seen it once. It was
6
an almond, actually. Mm-hmm.
Including just working in the ER, Chicago, Delaware. Oh, yeah. 6 or 7 or 8 times. Classic.
Clearly your patients don't know how to chew.
Well, it's in the ER, not my patients.
Send them my way.
Will do. Now, when you have the high-risk infants, who, again, I would send to the allergist first, to prevent peanut reactions, you need to give 6 to 7 grams of peanut protein per week in 3 or more feedings. The mild to no eczema kids should freely consume peanut products, again, to family practice and cultural preferences, whatever that means. The bottom line from Dr. Fleischer, have infants eat allergenic foods early and often. Another interesting recommendation in the article was about eggs. It talks about when we first introduce eggs, we should give it in baked products first and not in scrambled eggs or hard-boiled eggs. Now, I used to say give the yolks first and then the whites, but you can teach old dog new tricks. And since I read this, I specifically tell parents about eggs, give them baked products first before you go to other forms of egg. What do you tell them about eggs, Matt?
I just tell them to be careful. I don't do the baked egg thing first, although I know that's the way the allergists will tend to introduce it when they're testing in the in their offices. I'll usually tell folks that somewhere around between 9 and 12 months is a reasonable time to start eggs.
It also mentions you should have a logical progression about solids and to perhaps give the meats first, and once they've got that texture, you can go on to fish. They also mention a little cheese and yogurt later in infancy can be okay, but again, no regular milk until at least a year because of the GI blood loss inflammation issue a la Frank Oskey.
Who was?
The chairman of pediatrics at Johns Hopkins and the editor of Contemporary Pediatrics. Lastly, Matt, what peanut products do you actually give to a 4 to 6 month old infant?
I will generally suggest when I've done this that people merely take a small amount of peanut butter on the tip of a spoon and mix it right into some of the baby's food. Again, a limited amount, but I think if you take a tiny little bleb of peanut butter on the spoon and spin it around in some cereal or in some carrots or whatever, that's a means of introducing something like that.
And that likely works, but looking at the guidelines, they're very specific about doing it. So I'm going to quickly go over their recommendations for docs, but for parents, if you want to go by the book of how to introduce peanut products.
So didn't you say 5 to 7 grams?
Total in a week.
So they're supposed to divide that out.
I'll go over
week.
that.
Okay, good, because I'm confused.
Okay, but just take a little bit of preparing and cooking. Do you like to cook, Matt?
I love to cook.
Really?
Yeah.
I do not like to cook. As you
it.
know, microwave sweet potatoes.
Oh yeah,
Boiled corn on the cob, meat in the grill.
Yeah.
Simple tastes. I even tried the blue Hello Fresh plated apron meal kit thing, and it was really hard. Did you know, Matt, that garlic comes in a big bulb with separate individual cloves inside it?
Well, of course I knew
Well,
that.
well-
I cook. In fact, if you want to ever prepare it and it's really delicious and it's not really sharp garlicky, it's more nutty garlicky, you want to take maybe the first quarter to half inch off the top of a head of garlic and then sprinkle a little bit of olive oil on there and a little bit of salt. You can do pepper if you want to too. Some people will put this in a little muffin tin. Other people will just put it in by itself in the oven. Turn the oven up to about 400. You can either cover it up with some aluminum foil or leave it to roast. And golly, in a short period of time, you've got a deliciousness in terms of something you can spread all over, some crackers or garlic bread or anything along that lines. It's really quite tasty.
Thank you for that. I'll never do that.
Oh, come on. That's painless and quick.
I didn't even know about this whole clove thing. So I thought the entire thing was one clove. The directions were not clear. It's almost like they assumed I was James Beard.
How could they possibly have done that?
And then they tell you to mince it. Who knows what mincing means?
Most people who cook do know what that means.
Anyway, I put the entire group of what I thought was one clove, but was all the cloves in the first dish because I assumed it was a clove, and it was really, really garlicky. And I had no garlic left for the last 2 meals. One was pizza dough, which required a roller. Now, who has a roller in their house?
I have a roller. What did you use?
Well, I used a bottle of wine, but then the label on the wine kind of got inside the dough. Again, it didn't warn me that specialized cooking equipment was needed to do it. And even after that, it was a sad, lumpy-looking pizza, but it was actually the tastiest of the 3 meals that I made.
Don't ever invite me over for that. I prefer my pizza without wine labels.
Okay. Peanut products for young infants. There's 4 choices given on how to make peanut food. Each of these make about 2 to 3 grams of peanut protein. So going back to what you said, Matt, if you do this, you'd give 3 servings a week to get that full 6 to 7 grams. Choice number 1 is La Bamba. Okay, so here is a bit of a rattlesnake. Bamba, bamba, se necesita un poco de gracia. Come on, Matt. Un poco de gracia para mirarti. Arriba, arriba. Ay, arriba, arriba. Por ti seré, por ti seré, por ti seré. Yo no soy marinero. Yo no soy marinero. Bamba, bamba. You don't think I sounded like Richie Valens?
No.
Lou Diamond Phillips?
No.
right.
None of the above.
Okay, so this first one, La Bamba stick recipe.
Did you ever have you ever seen Los Lobos, by the way?
I have not.
I will say, and I say this, how did Trump put it the other day? With all surety. I say this. They are the most underrated American band. They're just absolutely fabulous. They are just true musicians. They've all been playing together for something like 40 or 50 years since they were in high school. They grew up in the same neighborhood. I mean, just fabulous. Their newest member has only been with them for like 30 years. That's Steve Berlin, their sax player. Wow.
Hashtag
Check them out.
Hashtag man crush Los Lobos.
Major man crush on Los Lobos. Oh, what? Check this out. I got my picture taken with Cesar Rojas.
Didn't he play shortstop for the Washington Senators
no
in
way,
1962?
Man. And with David Hidalgo. So those are the two main singers for Los Lobos, although the entire band is just laden with talent.
I'll take your
Check
word
them out.
for it.
Check them out.
All right, La Bamba stick recipe. Mix about 20 little sticks of Bamba in warm water, let it cool, or you can mix it with breast milk or formula and mash it well. You can also puree in fruits and vegetables. And older kids with La Bamba, you can just offer them the Bamba stick straight out. Choice number 2, peanut butter. Just like you said, Matt, giving a little bit of peanut butter. So the first question about peanut butter is, what brand? What do you like, Matt?
Oh, I'm a Skippy guy. Yeah, I've tried some of the organics. They're not too bad. They're much less sweet. I actually kind of like the Skippy crunchy, but the rest of my family doesn't. How about you? What's your flavor?
In this case, we're in complete agreement. I like Skippy smooth.
Okay.
Certainly, if you're giving it to a young infant, you're not going to give the chunky. I think we both agree with that.
Yes.
But I have to say, I do not believe in Peter Pan when it comes to peanut butter.
No, Jif wasn't a favorite either.
No. All right, so you take 2 teaspoons of creamy peanut butter, you mix it with warm water, again, let it cool, or breast milk or formula, mash it well. You can put in, again, those pureed fruits and veggies or mashed potatoes. For older infants and kids, certainly you can put a little bit of peanut butter spread on a piece of toast or a cracker. Choice number 3, whole peanuts. Now, again, don't give whole peanuts to young children, but you ground them up into about 2.5 teaspoons, and then you use a blender to create a powder or paste, and you add it to pureed fruits or other meals. Again, you got to use a blender. It sounds complicated. There's cooking involved, so
go dollop.
And the last choice, you can use peanut flour or peanut butter flour. Now, Matt, do you know that existed?
No.
Me neither. Maybe it doesn't exist. I've never seen it. But if you do use that, you put 2 teaspoons and mix it with applesauce or other foods and give that. So that is our take on peanut allergies and the new peanut guidelines.
That's a wrap.
And we'll be right back with the treatment of allergic rhinitis.
So treatment's highly individualized and depends on a number of different factors. These factors include severity of symptoms, age of the patient, concurrent complications, coexisting conditions, and environmental and social considerations. One of the mainstays of treatment for allergy is environmental control. This is the first line of treatment in many cases. This includes particular attention being paid to the child's room and especially to the child's bedding. With dust mite allergy, for instance, minimizing exposure to the dust mite can include dust mite-proof covers for the mattresses, box springs, and pillows. Stuffed animals are a dust mite's dream, and their presence really poses a risk to the child in terms of increasing their allergy.
Yes, so the first thing you need to do is go to Bed Bath & Beyond or BB&B if you're a Broad City fan.
A what city fan?
A Broad City fan. You should know that because our favorite local allergist is now related to Alana, which I announced at my big meeting in front of 250 people because he was our keynote speaker, and I got silenced. So very, very disappointed that the broader pediatric community does not watch
Sorry, I couldn't help you out
Broad
on that.
City. No, it's just something I need to bear. But I also recommend getting a dehumidifier for the basement and also just not playing outside in the morning. All the allergens are worse in the morning. They have to go to school. I don't make them homeschool, but if they have to, especially in the weekends, it's better to play later in the day.
So I want to get back to killing dust mites because that seems to be a great exercise in limiting some of the exposure of your child to allergens. So dust mites tend to love to be on stuffed animals, and killing them is not hard. But the hard part is trying to get rid of the dead dust mite and its parts. So a dead dust mite is really just as allergenic as a live one is. So many of the stuffed animals and toys can be put in the washer, just like anything else that you would want to wash, any piece of clothing. Problem with washing some of the stuffed animals is that they lose that soft, fluffy, and cuddly and comforting feel. Others completely disintegrate, and the stuffing gets everywhere, and that's a god-awful mess, of course. Did you have a stuffed animal?
No.
Oh, that tells me a lot. I had Tim Teddy. So Tim Teddy was falling apart in pieces to the point where I guess it was foam, but he finally became kind of sandy on the inside, and he didn't start out that way. And I went off to college, and guess who wasn't around when I came home, Rob? That was a real big sore point at my house.
Your mom?
Teddy. She was next after Tim Teddy bit it. She's lucky she's still around. My great uncle Charlie gave me Tim Teddy the day I was born, so that's unfair. I can't talk about this anymore. Anyway, so
I was picturing coming home, Mom.
Are you talking like a Chunky doll thing, like Tim did in my mom? Nice.
I don't know what I'm talking about.
All right, so killing dust mites on stuffed animals or anything for that matter. If you're going to do it in a washing machine, the washer has to be at least 130 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. And in most homes, the hot water heaters are set to 105 to 108. And this is for safety reasons. We're always telling parents, turn down your hot water heater so you don't scald your kid.
Right.
Well, if you want to cook these little buggers out of your stuffed animals, you got to turn it back up again if this is the way you're going to do it. Many of the newer dryers, though, have an allergy setting, and that allows the temperatures to get up to really 180 or 190 degrees, and that will kill dust mites and almost anything else. The problem with that is that the amount of electricity they use really becomes a little bit prohibitive after a while. Also, the feeling of a stuffed animal after it's been cooked like that really isn't that comforting,
right.
Sensation that a lot of kids have.
So the solution is put them in the freezer.
Yeah.
And that's what I often tell people to do is put them in the freezer for a day, every few weeks. They'll still come out looking well. Your beautiful Beanie Babies will still look just like new after they've been frozen for a day.
I hate Beanie Babies.
Oh,
I would put them in there and I'd keep them in there.
My kids have like hundreds of Beanie Babies.
Oh, man. You know what?
Happy Harry's used to sell them
Here
for
we go.
$5 on the way home.
Here we go. So in my mind, Beanie Babies are the most ridiculous trend ever. And you know what? Wait, don't say anything. All I have to say here is see Rule 1. And you know what Rule 1 is? People are stupid. And here's the other part of it. Beanie Babies completely lack that savoir-faire, that like tongue-in-cheek type of thing that they had going on with Pet Rocks. I mean, now that was funny, because of the irony of it, like Pet Rock. But Beanie Babies?
Have you read the tush tags?
For God's sakes.
They're ironic. The tush tags are ironic.
Please.
And the names.
What are you going to do with your 5,000 Beanie Babies,
We're going
man?
to agree to disagree.
You're going to be able to insulate your crawl space.
It's going to be my retirement. Actually not, because everybody else has 5,000
exactly
Beanie Babies
right.
except for your family.
Oh, these are collectible. Yeah. Well, not when 40 million Americans have them. Oh, my God. Don't get me. All right, I'm done with that. So sheets and covers need to be washed or dry cleaned frequently, and that really kind of completes the issue on the dust mites.
All right, let's talk about pets.
Okay. What we have to say about pets. What I have to say about pets is household pets can be a huge issue. Ideally, a pet should be removed, but oftentimes the family will sacrifice themselves by suffering tremendously in the face of having a pet, just to keep Rover or Snowflake in their house. If the family is hell-bent on keeping that pet, there can be some benefit to keeping the pet out of the child's bedroom and using air purifiers. Remember, the dander from pets, especially cats, is crazy sticky. I mean, almost like cactus pine sticky.
It's always fun when I'm talking to some families about, especially larger families, and talking about maybe the kid has asthma and they're older. And I know the parents thinking in their mind, well, I really like this dog and I have like 4 other kids. And so maybe Kevin or Aaron can go live with his aunt. I'm just saying. I'm just wondering, like, if they're actually
expendable.
Thinking,
It's funny because
I have one dog and I have 5 kids.
And sometimes, especially if they've had the dog for longer than they've had the children, they're kind of like, well, it's kind of like who was here first.
And the dog cuddles up to them and listens to them a little bit more.
Did you have a dog when you were younger?
I did.
What,
I don't want to tell
was
you.
Was the dog around? Come on, man, fess up.
Tell you.
Was the dog around before you were around or after?
After.
I mean, after. Oh, okay.
It was a toy poodle.
Oh God.
But it was a mighty toy poodle.
My labs would eat him for
Bambi.
breakfast. We had mutts at my house. My parents had gotten the first one, whose name was get this, Tuffy had gotten Tuffy just before I was born. And so Tuffy and I grew up together.
See, and that's probably brilliant by your parents, whether they meant it or not.
Inadvertently.
Because while if you have a child who's allergic, they need to have avoidance. Many, many studies show that growing up with a pet from birth, especially dogs, protects children from future allergies and obesity. And it all gets back to building a healthy microbiome. In the same vein, a New England Journal study from 2016 showed that growing up in an Amish family in Indiana who had traditional single-family farms protected those children against allergies and asthma compared to Hutterite families in South Dakota who have large-scaled mechanized farming. So the scientists who found this then took samples of house dust from the Amish houses and they sprayed them intranasally into mice and found that it reduced inflammation. So perhaps someday we'll all get some Amish nose spray for allergies.
That sounds
for
good
your
to
local
me.
Dwayne Reed or Walgreens, and we've got Lancaster close to here, so there's a lot of
It's
Amish
Lancaster,
families.
man. I went to school there. We
Oh, I
pronounce
forgot.
it Lancaster.
You were a dip.
Not Lancaster.
Okay.
Lancaster. Rolls off the tongue.
Lesson learned. So in the meantime, with all these issues about the hygiene hypothesis and having a cow in your kitchen might reduce allergies, I do tell families that they, especially not to be sexist, but moms, that they may want to stop cleaning their house so much and get some farm animals for the kitchen, and that may be helping their child have reduced allergies in the future.
Have you ever considered getting a potbelly pig?
No, but I've heard those are.
I heard they rock. Yeah,
You get one first.
I would think. Yeah, I
and
would
let
think
me
about
know
it.
how your rabbit and your
I'm gonna make
dogs
you.
enjoy
I'm gonna
it.
make you answer this.
Okay.
What was the toy poodle's name?
Oh, I did already. You missed it.
Oh, what was it?
Bambi.
You didn't say that because I would have mocked you.
Well,
Bambi.
mock away. From the movie.
You'll never live this down. It's national now. Did you
All right.
name it?
I did not name it,
Oh, that would have been better.
but later on, my dog was Cody Jack.
That was a cool name.
And
I
it
like
is,
that.
yes.
That is a very cool name.
I miss him. He was
All right, let's get back to it here. So pollen exposure and trying to eliminate it can also cause disruption at home. Optimally, windows should be closed and air conditioners should be turned on. Most of us suggest showering a child off before bed and using fresh sheets on that first night so that the child doesn't end up sleeping with the enemy. So how do we treat this from a pharmacologic standpoint? Well, we're going to start out with oral antihistamines. So this is the first-line pharmacologic treatment. This is most effective in controlling rhinorrhea,
Runny
sneezing,
nose.
and there you go, and pruritus. It's
Itchiness.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Interpreter.
I feel like I'm doing the 10 plagues here for Passover.
Do you do the 10 plagues during Passover?
Yes, we have to have a Passover together.
I
I have finger puppets for each plague. It's
Really?
Yes, I do. It's really cool. And then the last one is really
wanna
sad.
try the
It's
locust one.
Death of the firstborn. It's like a baby that's dead. It's really kind of
Are you
creepy.
serious?
Yes, totally serious.
Wow. Catholics don't have anything like that.
You got enough stuff.
Oh, we got crazy good
got
stuff. Anyway, so first-generation antihistamines include things like diphenhydramine, a.k.a. Benadryl, chlorpheniramine, and hydroxyzine. And these are very effective, but the issue with them is that they can cause significant sedation. There's also the matter of what it's considered to be the paradoxic reaction. Have you ever had kids in your practice have that?
Yes, so that comes up when parents talk about giving Benadryl to the kids when they're on an airplane flight, but kids will get it and they'll go nuts.
Oh,
and
crackers.
crazy.
Yeah, like possessed.
And I had one family that had to turn around the tarmac and come back.
See, I usually will suggest that if they're going to use that, it's a soft recommendation to start with.
Try it first.
Yeah, absolutely. You might want to try this
I didn't
first.
suggest they use it, but they did, and they told me the story.
That's one of those talk to your pediatrician moments.
I don't recommend that. But, again, the issue with these older type antihistamines is they don't last that long. They make you loopy. The ones that aren't paradoxical, a lot of them just get dulled. You really should not go to school on it. So
Yeah.
they work great.
They do.
just have limited roles that I'm sure you'll get to.
A lot of people will find those to be the case and maybe just use them at night. Although since their duration of action is only 6 to 8
Right.
hours or so,
Right.
that doesn't really control things during the day.
I have to say, I used to every day growing up take a Coricidin, but I think it's Coricidin. And I think
Coricidin,
it's
yeah.
still there, and I think it was a placebo.
Oh,
In fact, I don't think it did
maybe.
anything, but it had the old type antihistamine, and it's
Well-
still around, and I still don't recommend it.
So there are now second-generation antihistamines and even third-generation antihistamines, and those are things that people are well familiar with the names. Loratadine, which is generic for Claritin, which is out there. Cetirizine, which is the generic of Zyrtec, and fexofenadine, which is Allegra. And now over the counter newly is Xyzal, that's XYZAL, and that's levocetirizine, and Clarinix, which is desloratadine. And so essentially the drug companies have retooled their original meds in order to cash in on an alternative. And so these are chemical cousins of the original medicine.
Xyzal and Clarinix are isomers. I think they're L isomers. So supposedly they're more purified. You get more of the good stuff, left for the side effects. It's kind of like Focalin, dexmethylphenidate versus regular Ritalin methylphenidate.
Yeah, sure.
But in all of these, I don't know what your
Do you recommend
opinion
those?
is.
Do you recommend Xyzal and
I recommend
Clarinix?
generics.
Yeah, I do
and
too.
so I really tell people you can pay 50% more for the name Claritin or Zyrtec, but go with the generics first. There are a subsuit of patients who seem to do better on the brand names, but I go to generics, and I rarely have had people go on to get the isomers. You know, I may bring them up, and sometimes they go on themselves. Now they're over the counter.
And they're not, let's be clear, they're not necessarily more potent, but what these newer antihistamines lack is the sedation, at least to the same degree as the first generation antihistamines. And so, suppose I'm your patient, I say to you,
"Oh God, you're my patient."
Is it time for you to move on?
I can't get past that.
You're 54. Isn't it time for you to move on? So when I say to you, Dr. Walter, tell me the best antihistamine, because that's the one I want. What do you say?
I say there's not much difference between them. And I usually start out loratadine, which is a generic Claritin. Probably the one, if I had to be pinned down on what works the most, even though it's a little bit more sedating than the other, even though they're supposed to be non-sedating, is probably the Zyrtec. It's also, Zyrtec's the only one that's approved for hives. And chronic hives, so I'll go to that for that also. Yeah. But I don't find a big difference. It's also interesting that the adult dose for a lot of them, 10 milligrams, you could start at age 6.
Right.
So 5-year-old, you can use almost the adult dose. And I think a lot of the parents will underdose these and give a half a teaspoon, which is way low for a 5-year-old.
They're crazy safe. I always tell people, I'm not sure I can think of a single, off the top of my head, side effect of loratadine. Nothing at all that I'm concerned with. The other thing is that I'll explain antihistamines. Now I'll use antihistamines actually as a model when I'm talking about some of the stimulant meds for ADD. I'll explain them in the sense that, hey, listen, for me, every one of them might work. But for you, I'm not sure. So I'd suggest starting with something. And if that doesn't work at this juncture, the only alternative we have is to move on to the next one. So it's really very much a trial and error situation. This hopefully is going to be addressed within the next 10 years or so through a field called pharmacogenetics, wherein we will take a buccal swab. This is already being used, I think, to an extent with antihypertensives.
ADD also, and
ADD,
even depression. We'll touch base on those.
Yep. So it's kind of scary cool. You take a swab, and then within a short period of time, you are told which of the medications available are best suited for you and your physiology and your metabolism. Really, really kind of neat stuff.
Definitely the wave of the future, though it's not here yet, even with ADD and depression. So be careful. But what about, you mentioned these things, what about the D, the Claritin D, the Zyrtec D, the Allegra D? How often do you recommend those?
Like never.
Me too. I'm not a big fan of the decongestants. I have some families who take straight Sudafed, and I'm not going to argue, and they say it's just the greatest thing, but I just find it makes your mucus thicker. It can give headaches. It's not part of my usual armamentarium.
See, I don't really have an objection to pseudoephedrine or phenylephrine or any of those things in particular. But what I do tell people is I don't like the way they're packaged in the 12 and 24-hour preparations, because that's just a stimulant bomb. And so Sudafed has been found to have some value in older children, especially when it's nasal congestion is their biggest issue. And as we had just mentioned, that's the one thing that oral antihistamines aren't terribly helpful with. It can be used alone, or it can be used in combination with an antihistamine. But as we just said, it should always be used with caution, because some children really experience significant stimulatory effects, and that can produce hyperactivity and crankiness and irritability and sleep disturbances. So I really stay away from those long. I mean, it's like having too much coffee.
Yeah, I agree, especially the 24-hour versions of them.
So decongestants used with caution.
And, we have to just mention the one change over even the last 10, 15 years, that you can't get these in the drugstore without going behind the counter because of Sudafed and
Breaking Bad, right?
Crystal meth, yeah. Did you watch Breaking Bad?
It's on my watch list.
Well, I won't tell you.
Don't tell me. No, please don't tell
Bryan
me.
Cranston.
Don't tell me that, Nick.
I saw Bryan Cranston playing LBJ in All the Way on Broadway. They made a movie out of it.
Yeah.
amazing. Even back on Malcolm in the Middle, I liked him. But, all right, we went off task again.
So what's next, Rob?
The next is, so we talked about the antihistamines. The next thing is nasal steroids. And I certainly think that that's been a great advance in pediatric care. There's now over-the-counter nasal steroids, fluticasone, Flonase, budesonide, Rhinocort.
Yep.
There's also the Nasonexes, Q-nasal, which is, have you seen that? But it packs a punch. The kids go, whoa, it knocks them off their feet.
I tried that once. I felt like I was blowing my brains out.
And even Dimisto, which is fluticasone plus an antihistamine. So it's the only one that's a combination. But, in general, people say, what's the best one? And I don't think there's that much difference. They have big PR departments. I just say try a nasal steroid.
I think, at least from the last I had read, that the American Academy of Allergy and Immunology really recommend these as first line. They're really, to me, they're the most effective pharmacologic agents for allergic rhinitis. They are topical sprays. They're considered to be extraordinarily safe. And at least two of them, omeprazole and fluticasone, have really been FDA approved down to younger patients. And it's extremely safe.
For me, it's the symptoms. So if it's mostly itchy eyes, sneezing, oral antihistamines first. If it's mostly just stuffiness and runny nose and really nasal, then go right to the nasal steroids.
Yeah.
And honestly, for a lot of our patients, it's both. And the studies showed there's no growth issues with getting nasal steroids. It always comes up. And certainly I don't want to use it if we don't need to use it.
Even histologically, I mean, from what I remember, I've read studies where it talked about people who've used these for literally every day for up to 2 years straight. And when they actually do biopsies and take a look at the nasal mucosa, everything's cool.
A lot of people just shove it way up their nose. They get nosebleeds, and you're really trying to get the nasal steroids in the turbinate area.
Right.
So you don't want to go past them.
Yeah.
And you want to gently spray it in the opening of your nose and take a sniff, but don't breathe really deep in. If you can feel it all in the back of your throat, that's not going to be working for you.
I'll actually have them practice with an otic specula and show them, like, hey, listen, this is what I want you to do. I want you to point it away from the middle of your nose and not to the middle of your nose. Because as we talked about with epistaxis, that's where all that plexus of blood vessels is.
And nosebleeds is a side effect of the steroids, especially if you misuse it.
And I always wonder whether it's a matter of there was too much friction and they were jamming it up in there, or whether it is the steroid actually thinning the skin.
Right. So we have oral antihistamines. We have nasal steroids. The third of 4 is eye drops. And some kids and adults, when allergy hits them, it just hits their eyes. And sometimes that runs in families, but they've got the itchy, injected eyes that spares the limbus near the cornea, often with lid swelling. And in extreme cases, they get this chemosis
edema
coming out. It's like a jellyfish.
Yeah. Oh, I've seen that only a couple times,
and
but
then
it looks miserable.
They can get bumpiness on the palpebroconjunctiva. Cool compresses. If they have contact lenses, don't wear them. And then there are the newer antihistamine allergic drops like the over-the-counter Zatador, prescription, Patanol, Pataday.
The majority of the insurers don't seem to cover these anymore. And so I'll usually just go with Zatador. I think last time I checked it was like $14 over the counter.
I sometimes will write the prescription for the Patanol and then tell them to go to the pharmacist and see which one's cheaper for them.
Absolutely.
One thing I don't do, you mentioned before about we're always scared about eyes. So in extreme cases, they often will need to get steroid eye drops.
Yes.
I just never like to give steroid eye drops. It just scares me. Even if I don't think they have herpes in their eyes, it just scares me, and I don't do it.
Well, that's because
I'm happy to have the eye doctor.
Sure, we had it drilled into our heads. Never use steroid eye drops because, God forbid, somebody has herpes. You could blind them. It was. I still run scared from that idea.
Right. Although maybe we should reconsider.
Yeah,
but
maybe.
The fourth one, which can be added if on the full court allergy press, is Singular. You mentioned it earlier about how worries about anxiety, irritability, even depression.
Back when we were talking about Miralax.
Right. And I don't see that. I have seen kids with some headaches. I had seen kids with some GI issues, some kids with sleep issues. And sometimes we give it at night, I'll change to the day, especially as a good medication, obviously, if they also have asthma. So you're kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone.
Yeah, it's interesting the way this evolved, because I think that Singular came out just as I was starting to train. And it came out touted as an alternative to some of the other asthma medications. And it was kind of serendipitous for the drug companies that within a year or two, people started to realize that, oh my goodness, and the allergic rhinitis symptoms are better in my patients as well. The company ran back to the FDA and got it approved for allergic rhinitis as well.
And there's no competition for them.
Yeah.
So you use Singular?
I do from time to time, and I will say, contrary to what you've seen, I've seen a handful of kids who really did not do well from an emotional standpoint on it, or from they did get kind of OCD-ish, they got a little bit irritable, and so I warn parents of this ahead of time these days.
And lastly in treatment is immunotherapy, allergy shots. We touched base a little about the newer SLIT, which is a sublingual immunotherapy that is now FDA approved. And I've had a few kids on that. You take it daily. It's much easier. You don't have to go to the allergist. There's no needles. And it's mostly for grass allergies, of what I understand. I've had some kids use it seasonally. And it's been very effective. These kids who don't do well with all the over-the-counter meds that we've already talked about. I got allergy shots as a kid for years. My parents' best friend was our pediatrician, and he was also an allergist. So I grew up thinking that it was normal for your parents' friend to come over.
He was a pediatrician and an allergist.
Stick needles in you. Yeah. Doesn't everybody have a parent's friend who comes in and gives you a shot every week for allergies?
Can we just talk about like double dipping in terms of specialties?
Well, I have to say, his name is Dr. Boris. He's a brilliant guy, and he did allergy when he was in the public health service for his armed service requirement back in the 60s. Allergy is one of those specialties, I think, that lends itself to being in the community.
Yeah. Oh, it definitely does. Yeah.
Hi, Dr. Boris, if you're out listening.
Do you ever find yourself using, heavy duty stuff, prednisone, nasal decongestant sprays, any of those types of things?
No, well, certainly stay away from the Afrins of the world because of my fear of rhinitis medicamentosa. That was also drilled.
That's why I asked you that, because I can never pronounce
that.
So I was setting you up. Yeah.
So I tell people specifically, don't use Afrin. There have been some of my older patients that will use it occasionally, but I think that it's easy to get hooked on it, and I don't think that's a good hole to go down if possible. But in terms of the other, the Mucinex of the world, guaifenesin, I don't think that really helps
evidence
very much.
that these things help? No, they're just really like, show me the money.
Right,
show me the evidence.
I'm on Mucinex. Oh, fine. Yeah. Well, you're obviously here, so it's not working.
Save your money.
Otherwise, with allergy shots, again, they have their role. I don't have that many kids on as much as they were years ago because of all these other products. I think there is a role with kids with severe asthma and allergies on these other medications. And I've had some kids go on the allergy shots, and it seems to really reduce their asthmatic episodes.
Yeah, I think there's good scientific evidence to point in that direction as well. Well, I think that, at least for the time being, that wraps up our discussion on allergy. Well, I'm sure at some point down the road we'll rekindle this flame, but for right now, just to once more summarize, so allergy is a real misery for an awful lot of people. There are an awful lot of ways that we have to treat it. Nothing it seems to be 100%, but at least we can provide relief, and hopefully relief not just from the physical side effects of allergy, but also from the exhaustion and from the just the general drain it takes on one's life from a social standpoint.
The poor children running home from school with their nose dripping, watching Batman and Dark Shadows for the afternoon.
Yeah. All right. We are the Podcast Pediatricians. We will be back again soon, and the next topic we're going to tackle is going to be...
It's going to be a rant, and it's going to be a rant about direct-to-consumer telemedicine.
All right.
I'm very excited.
Bite into that.
Good night, Moon.
Good night. Good night, Rob. Good night, everyone out there. Have a great day.
Hello, it's Elmo. And Elmo's so happy to be here to sing you some of his favorite songs. Elmo hopes you like them. Hit it.
Podcast Pediatricians Productions. All rights reserved.